And we are back. We're gonna close out our trade speculation podcast series. The final division we have is the Southwest. Some more interesting teams here to talk about. We have the Mavs, the Spurs, the Pelicans, the Rockets, and the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
We're gonna once again just jump right into it because there's a lot to unpack here. And the biggest one out of the bunch, in my opinion, is the Mavs. So that is where we're gonna start.
So I feel like the Mavs really need to, first of all, get a dominant big man to really lock down the paint. Because other than that, they have a lot of good pieces.
Yeah, I think and you don't really agree with this, but I think it's time to move on from the Porzingis ordeal of this whole thing. Even though Porzingis has lots of value and he's a really good basketball player, the way they used him this last year made no sense. So if they're gonna keep him, they better use him in a way where they're making use of his skill set.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's time to look elsewhere.
The reason why I disagree with trading Porzingis is because they just got rid of what's his name, Rick Carlisle, and he was the one that was using Porzingis in that way. Now they're gonna get a different coach, and I assume that they're gonna use him differently, and they're gonna use his skill set better because they're paying him so much, and he has the potential. You
Yeah.
know?
So their head coach is Jason Kidd going forward, and Jason Kidd could implement an offense where he gets Porzingis involved. But I think
Yeah.
the value of Jason Kidd, and you saw this with Giannis years ago, is he helps those playmaking guards get to the next level. Now, within the case of Luka Doncic, I think he's the greatest 22-year-old basketball player we've ever seen in our lifetime. Maybe outside of like Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, I think the biggest thing with this team is just what they're going to do with Porzingis because there's only two ways to go: keep him or trade him. And if they keep him, which is what you're saying they should do, if they keep him, they need to use him in a better way because right now they're not making the most of his skill sets, making him relegating him to the corner with the catch and shoot jump shots. He's way better than that.
Yeah. And I feel
Um,
like the next thing after that they have to do is after choosing what to do with Porzingis is get more wing players because they don't have enough wing defenders. They only have Dorian Finney-Smith to fill in that role.
and he was like an unsung hero for that team. He played really well last couple of years, and especially this last year. But and him and Kaliba are really good defenders, so they have them both for the next year. But they need to add to that, especially because Josh Richardson kind of regressed on that end of the floor, and Luka doesn't have any defensive chops at all. And then outside of that, you have only big men on the team,
Yeah.
so
They
you
have a,
really
they
need
have a,
to.
they have a few pretty redundant players as well. It's like they have Maxi Kleber and Nico Melli. They're pretty much the same guy. Like, they're pretty much the same person in terms of
Yeah,
basketball.
I think the one positive here with this team is that the players they have um on the bottom end of the roster are young players with potential and players that could be projects for other teams that may be interested in taking them on.
Yeah.
Um, they have Tyrell Terry, who was highly coveted into last year's draft, and then they have Jalen Brunson and Josh Green as well. But on
Yeah.
top of those guys, they need to bring back the salaries of JJ Redick and Josh Richardson, who has a player option. JJ Redick is a unrestricted free agent. I could see a world in which he comes back because he wants to play on a contending team, but
Well,
just
yeah.
JJ Redick doesn't make sense in the long term as your backup guard. I think you need a defensive player. So if they bring him back, it should be as a part of a signing trade.
No, I feel like JJ Redick, he's probably going to sign for like a minimum contract at this point. He's way too old to really demand more than that.
He
He's
made
like,
$13 million last year, but he wasn't really worth that dollar figure. I think at most he's worth like a minimum, a mid level at like
yeah,
the $5-6 million range.
maybe. I feel like he's worth a minimum contract at this point because he's 38 years old. He's going to be at least. And he only
Yeah.
averaged 4 points a game this last season.
Yeah. But
And he
sorry,
only played 13 games.
he only played 13 games this last year. I didn't even know
Yeah.
that. He was on the Pelicans the year before, right?
Yeah.
So was he on the Mavericks the whole of this last year? Because I really don't remember him playing anything on that team. I guess that's
No,
why.
yeah, he was on the Pelicans to begin this year.
Okay, so they traded him.
Yeah,
Yeah. Regardless, I think they need. Oh yeah, they also need to bring back Tim Hardaway Jr., who's a free agent, because he
yeah,
was going ballistic against the Clippers in the first round in
for
both
sure.
years, last year and the COVID year, the year before, 2020. So he complements what Luka does well, spacing the floor, attacking the basket, creating off the dribble.
Mhm,
But they need to add some defensive pieces. I think that's the biggest glaring hole.
for sure.
And Luka's only 22, so they have lots of time, and he seems like a pretty loyal guy, but things can sour up quickly.
Yeah, you never know.
So they need to
It's
figure out what they want to do, especially because Luka is the best player on the team and he's only making $10 million next year. So if you want to
mhm.
make a finals run, again, we talked about in the other podcasts, the Clippers are going to fall out of the playoff race most likely next year or be at the bottom end of that. So that could help propel the team like the Mavericks into a contending situation with Luka Doncic on the $10 million contract.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think Luka Doncic is he's definitely a top five player. You know, he's really good, and we've seen that throughout the playoffs and everything. Uh, I just think the team's just lacking overall support for him as a
yeah,
player,
Yeah.
right? I think what the Mavericks definitely need to do in order to keep Luka is definitely get him a good player just to pick and roll with him, right? Because
yeah.
let's be real, the pick and roll with a Luka and like if they get somebody good, right? Like that's just kind of like unstoppable.
No matter who it
Luka
is.
and a complete scrub is a good pick and roll. So Luka with an above average pick and roll player like a Dwight Howard, who we keep name dropping into all these situations, but like that's just the reality of the situation. I think he's getting his pick and roll partner back next year, Dwight Powell, who wasn't playing, so that's interesting.
I mean, but
But
at the same time, because like you would say it would probably be Kristaps, right? But he's not big enough to really be that big of a threat rolling.
and I think he's scared. Kristaps. Sometimes it seems like he's scared to attack the basket because he's scared to get injured, and
Yeah,
because he's been so brittle throughout his career so far in the
yeah,
last 6 years. But Porzingis is again still only 25. He has room to grow still, and he's under contract for the next 2 years with a player option. For the third year. So they are looking into a positive situation. But again, this especially with the player as good as Luka Doncic, these things can turn sour quickly. I just don't see it happening this next year, especially if they do get the support from Luka that he needs.
yeah. All right, so I think it's time to move on to the next team.
So the next team is the San Antonio Spurs. And they're another team this offseason that are in a very weird predicament right now. DeMar DeRozan's contract is up, and he is most definitely the best player on the team,
Yeah,
but he doesn't really fit in terms of their long-term future. I think they need to start building around uh, their players that they have, the young players in DeJounte. Derek White's 27, so I wouldn't really add him into that.
no, yeah.
But DeJounte's 24, Lonnie Walker's 22. You have potential in a player like Devin Vassell, who's 20.
Jakob Poeltl.
But yeah, and then they have a guard who it kind of has gone under the radar, and he didn't really play that well this last year. Trey Jones, Tyus Jones's brother, but he had some potential coming out of college from Duke.
Mhm.
So if they could get something back for DeMar in a sign and trade situation, it'd be worth their while. I just don't see how they're going to facilitate that deal, considering DeMar really didn't seem to like it in San Antonio at all.
I feel like they need to trade DeMar and Rudy Gay.
Yeah, Rudy Gay makes no sense on this team. All their vets, they need to get. Patty Mills is coming off his contract. Rudy Gay is coming off his contract. Jakob Poeltl's only 25. He's on his contract for the next 2 years. So the
That's
good thing here is that the older veterans are coming off of their contracts.
yeah,
But you want to bring back DeMar, the valuable one of the bunch, so that you can make a sign and trade situation happen.
yeah.
Because if you lose DeMar for nothing, then you essentially lost Kawhi Leonard for nothing in the grand
Yeah.
scheme of things.
Pretty much.
Just what I think is why DeMar probably doesn't like it on the Spurs because I think he did come out and say he actually wanted to retire as a Raptors player, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
feel like when you got traded, that just kind of put a sour taste in his mouth, right?
Mhm.
And I think from just on there, he was just like, yeah, like, I don't know what to do, right?
He got
But
put in a situation that he didn't choose and he doesn't necessarily like.
yeah, but you know what? NBA is a business first, right?
Yeah.
It's about the players, but when you have a situation to get a player like Kawhi Leonard, you do it because it gives you a chance to win a championship, and we did win a championship in Toronto. So at first, it felt like they're trading DeMar for Kawhi, who was a bit of a tyrant, and then not tyrant because he didn't really even say much, but somebody that was causing problems in San Antonio at first when that deal happened. It didn't seem to make any sense, especially because he was unhealthy. But then we won the championship, and even though he left, it wasn't for nothing. Even though we didn't get anything back because we got the championship.
Yeah.
So that deal was worth it in the sense that we won the championship. DeMar, I just don't see his value in today's NBA. That's the real problem here. Because he doesn't shoot the three that well. He's a good playmaker, but he doesn't have defensive chops at all in the slightest, and he can't really shoot the three. And that's what the league is today. It is a 3-and-D league. So he can't do either of those.
It's really confusing.
Yeah, it's very confusing. And the interesting thing with him is that I think he's going into his 12th or 13th year. Regardless, if you go look at his plus minuses, and plus minus is a pretty garbage stat to look at in small sample sizes, but in an 11-year sample size, plus minus can tell you a lot about a player. And DeMar's plus minus tells you that when he's on the bench, out of his whole career, he's had 1 year where the team's worse with him on the bench, and that was by like a point or two, not much of a margin. But the rest of the years of his career, he's always been a minus when he's on the floor, and the team has been better with him on the bench. And that's just interesting to me that a player that's made All-Star games and had like an MVP-ish run in 2017, a player like that was a minus throughout his whole career.
It's crazy. I don't know. It's just the way he plays.
Yeah, it's definitely just the way he plays. What he does doesn't complement the direction the NBA has turned in since he became an all-star. I think the shift towards three-point shooting was in 2013, 2014, around that time. And he made his first all-star game in 2014. And since then, he has developed his playmaking, but he hasn't developed his range or his defense at all. And as somebody that's that athletic, it doesn't make any sense to me. He's not a good defender.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some talking about like, these could be the last couple of years of we see DeRozan in the NBA just based off like of how he plays and right. Like I feel like if the Spurs, if they offer him a max or something like that, I definitely think you should take it. But I think if he does take that, right? But like whatever happens, whatever contract he takes, right? Like I feel like it could be his last. Personally,
his last big contract for sure.
Yeah,
I think he may have like a situation where a team like the Orlando Magic, who have money to throw, could give him the money because, again, I said DeMar is a minus, but his teams did make the playoffs in multiple years, and he was a big part of that. So if a team like Orlando did want to make the playoffs, which makes no sense considering they just traded Vucevic away, so I don't see what team he would go to. But there's always a situation like that where he can make some money. I think going forward, it's kind of scary for him because he's this big name player that won't be making big name money in the future, in the very near future. And he's only 31. He's at the peak of his powers right now. At that age.
I as well think that because we're all Raptors fans here, right? So if DeMar could come back, I think that would be amazing. But at the same time, I see not because we would have to give up a lot just to meet the value of DeMar DeRozan to bring him back.
I think if they wanted to bring back DeMar, the only way you do that is to trade Kyle Lowry for him, which makes no sense. And if Kyle Lowry leaves, we'll have $24 million to give him, which also makes no sense. And I don't think he would take that because the only reason he would ever come to Toronto to play here would be to play with his best friend, Kyle Lowry. And if he's not here, it doesn't make any sense for him.
Yeah.
So I would love to see Kyle and DeMar back together. And if that happens, we'll be a playoff team again, especially with a Jalen Suggs and an improved Fred VanVleet and improved Pascal Siakam, players that got better since DeMar left. And him coming back into that situation would be very interesting. I don't see how it makes sense considering Lowry most likely won't be here next year.
It's just going to put us in no man's land, honestly, because we're not going to win championships with that roster.
No, I think that if they were to do that, it would be on like both of them saying, okay, yo, we want to play together. Let's take $12 million each, split this free agent money that the Raptors have in half. But knowing Kyle Lowry and his competitive spirit and how good he still really is, he's better than DeMar right now. And the
Yeah.
value he can provide to other teams, he's worth 30, like 25 to $30 million still.
Yeah.
So I don't see him doing that just because his boy wants to play with him. That doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't value that over my financial stability. And he could make money as well as win a championship still. So it just doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense for Kyle Lowry to do something like that.
All right. Next team I think is the Pelicans.
Yeah. So we're gonna do the New Orleans Pelicans. I'll pass that on to Barjinder.
Yeah, so personally, let's get the big issue out the way. I think the Pelicans need a new head coach, right?
Yeah.
They
I thought
now
they signed
have,
one, no?
yeah. Oh, wait, did they? I didn't know about that. Who's the coach? You know,
They signed
Willie
Willie
Green.
Green.
Willie Green. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know what
that's
he's
great
gonna
then.
do.
My point out the way. You know, it's great. I think that's great. I definitely think that though Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram, they need somebody with them to play, right? They need a third. They need
Yeah.
a star, somebody, right? Just I can't really think of any player. I mean, like again, Bradley Beal, right? That goes around with every team.
Yeah.
But
And again, there's another team that has the pieces to make a trade with Alonzo and a Kira Lewis and a Josh Hart and a Nikhil Alexander. They have the pieces that would entice a team like Washington to blow it up and trade Bradley Beal. But with the players they have right now, in my opinion, personally, they just did make the trade to get Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams. Um, on the floor, I feel like, or sorry, they traded away Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe. Sorry, my mistake, to get Jonas Valanciunas, and I think that's an upgrade for them. Especially with Zion Williamson, I just don't see why they would blow it up this early. I think the biggest thing for them is to bring back Alonzo Ball,
Yeah.
see what he can provide them, especially because he is really close friends with Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. They both love him. And mostly because he's an unselfish basketball player who's good on defense, shoots the three, great passer. So he complements what these players need. But definitely they need a third scorer type player.
Yeah, I don't know who that would be though, because it's not like they can get that from the draft. Really, they have a chance. Maybe, obviously, anything can happen, but they have the 10th pick in the draft this year, so they're not going to get the top players.
Yeah,
I think the
but-
good thing for them is that they have players that could develop into that. In a Nikhil Alexander, in a Kira Lewis Jr., who is more of a defender right now in the NBA. But
Wait, don't. I think actually they have the 17th pick now, right?
yeah, they traded down. So they traded
Yeah.
their 10th pick down to get the 17th pick. But this is a deep draft. And honestly, with all the young talent they have, at this point, they could have drafted a Josh Giddey who would have helped them right away as a playmaking player. But I see that kind of as a redundancy on the roster with them having a Brandon Ingram and a playmaker in Lonzo with a Zion Williamson. So them trading down and just looking for a project player makes sense to me, especially because they did upgrade their center spot with a Jonas Valanciunas.
Yeah.
I think the prospects are good for them. And again, they're another one of those teams, like any team that you could talk about in the West, where the Clippers look like they're going to fall out of the playoff race and they could jump into it.
I feel like the Pelicans have to trade someone like Jackson Hayes and like
Nikhil.
a big call. Yeah, maybe I want to trade Nikhil because he's a promising young guard who can help off the bench really. But I feel like they have to trade Jackson Hayes and like a big contract, maybe like James Johnson, I'm pretty sure, to get like a scorer to complement Zion Williamson.
Another good situation, and yeah, definitely they need a scorer to complement Zion, but I think the good situation they're going into this playoffs or this offseason with is that they're losing the contract of $16 million on James Johnson's name.
Yeah.
I think they need to find a way to get off of the Eric Bledsoe contract to get some money in free agency. Or they did trade him. So that means they did open up some money. Sorry, I'm still looking at the payrolls and it shows Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams still here. So just bear with me about that. They did trade that away. So
Yeah.
Them updating this would have helped a lot in terms of me trying to figure out how much money they have in the next offseason. It does look like with what Jonas is making this next year, they should have $8 to $12 million to throw at a player, and they could get a good role player type of wing, which is exactly what they need right now.
Yeah. All right. So I think it's time to move on to the Mavericks.
Well, we already did the Mavericks. I think the next team is the Houston Rockets.
Shaq
My
in the
bad.
full moment.
Yep. Shaq
Tinaful, Smeet Tinaful. The Rockets are just in a weird situation, and we talked about this in earlier podcasts too, where they traded away James Harden and they got back. They didn't even get back the other best player in the deal, who went to Cleveland in Jared Allen.
Yeah.
And then they also traded away Victor Oladipo, which didn't make any sense to me, because if I were them, I would just keep him and re-sign him, see what he's able to do on the floor. But instead, they opted to trade him for Kelly Olynyk and Avery Bradley, which doesn't really make any sense to me. I think the one positive they do have going forward is that they have a high draft pick. They have the second pick in the NBA draft tomorrow night, or for us it would be tomorrow night. I don't know when you guys are going to hear this. We're kind of still deciding when we're going to post this podcast, but going forward they have the second pick, and when you guys hear this, they're gonna have drafted somebody. It kind of depends who it's going to be. It could be Evan Mobley. It could be Jalen Green or Jalen Suggs. I think it's going to be Jalen Green, the way it's looking right now, but I could be eating my words in a few days when this goes up. Regardless, it doesn't make sense what they have on their roster. John Wall has one more year left on his deal with a player option the year after for $47 million. He is going to take that most definitely, and he's definitely not worth that money. John Wall is going to get paid. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. He's in that Kevin Love situation where no team wants him and he's getting paid too much.
Yeah.
I think the player that they can move for something is Eric Gordon, because teams do need the shooting and he can still provide that. You would look for a team like the Sixers to make that kind of deal to take on an Eric Gordon, because again, that's exactly what they need. But if they can get Mobley, they would have a good guard in Kevin Porter going forward. They would have a good wing in Jayshawn Tate going forward. Kenyon Martin Jr. showing some promise. And then you have Evan Mobley, presumably, or Jalen Suggs, Jalen Green, whoever they end up getting.
Did you mention Kevin Porter?
Yeah, Kevin Porter Jr. is what they got back from Cleveland away from the James Harden deal, which is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah.
Kevin Porter was in a situation in Cleveland where there was locker room issues, and they traded him for a second-round pick. So you got a really good basketball player for a bag of peanuts, which is really good for you.
Yep.
But you also traded away James Harden for less than peanuts. So
yeah,
I don't know.
You traded him away for like rotten apples and a banana.
That just sucks, man. Like, when you have a player that good, James Harden was the damn MVP, bro. And he was on that team at the beginning of last year, and now he's just gone, and they have nothing to show for it. Nothing to show for it at all.
Yeah,
They have Kelly Olynyk to show for it.
We called the Bucks.
And he's gone.
We called the Bucks the dumbest team in the NBA. It's probably actually the Rockets.
Yeah, and the smart GM that they have or had is gone now.
Yeah.
And Daryl Morey, he got out of there as fast as he could.
He got replaced by an absolute buck team.
And then Daryl Morey kind of screwed them by not doing the Ben Simmons deal.
Yeah.
Which should have happened, in my opinion. I think they should have done that deal. And if they got Ben Simmons, we would not be talking about them this way. They also would not have a high pick to go get an Evan Mobley or a Jalen Green or a Jalen Suggs. So it could go either way in the situation, I feel like.
Yeah.
The last team, the team that just made the trade, as we were talking about earlier with the New Orleans Pelicans, is the Memphis Grizzlies. They just made the trade to get up into the 10th pick from the 17th. And it looks like they're going to draft Josh Giddey with that pick. There's also potential for them to try to move up. People are talking about how they could package a Grayson Allen or a Brandon Clark or a Desmond Bain, one of the young players that they have on the roster, along with that 10th pick to move up in the draft. They have a lot of young pieces, and I think that's the positive in this situation. They have a lot going for them, especially because if you look at their salary cap table over the next few years, They have John Morant locked in for this next year and the year after on a team option for $12 million, after which he can become a free agent. But nobody on this team right now is making more than $14 million.
Mhm.
Actually, I think that's about to change with the contract that they just got with Steven Adams. Yeah, Steven Adams is going to make 17 million and Eric Bledsoe is going to make 18 million next year. So that is a correction because the salary caps still have not been updated on Basketball Reference.
Yeah.
But regardless, you still don't have expensive players on your team, and you have enough different players with good salary chunks on their name that you could trade, especially if they bring back a Justice Winslow at $13 million. It'll be interesting to see.
I don't know whether or not they will because he's been very. Yes, he hasn't really been good for them, and he's only had like 1 or 2 good years with the Heat.
I think the only situation they bring him back in is in a situation where he is still only 25 and a team could want him. I don't see why you would want him, considering he hasn't showed any growth or development whatsoever so far in the league. But just for that, because $13 million isn't that bad of a cap hit.
Yeah.
So if they were to take him on and move him, it would be a perfect situation for them. I just don't know what his value is at this point.
I mean, like he's shown potential because his best season was 2019. He averaged 12 points and 12 points and 4 assists. And you saw like he experimented with him at like basically as one of the primary ball handlers, and he played pretty well in that situation. But he's not going to get that opportunity in Memphis with Ja there. So
I think you want the ball in Ja's hands.
yeah.
And then the thing with the Grizzlies that's interesting, and it's kind of like the Raptors in a sense, but to a higher extent, they draft so well. If you look at their draft prospects over the last few years, they've drafted Dylan Brooks, DeAnthony Melton. They traded for Kyle Anderson. They drafted Brandon Clark, Grayson Allen, Desmond Bain, Jonte Porter, Xavier Tillman. All these guys, the commonality there is that they're multiple year college players who came to the NBA and made an instant impact. And
Yeah.
they could add another young player like a Josh Giddey, who is very young. He came from the NBL. He's already played pro basketball. And I think it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see how that dynamic works. But the Grizzlies are in a great situation right now.
Yeah, it's also gonna be really interesting to see where Jaren Jackson goes from here because he has a very interesting package. You know, like he can shoot, he can play defense. He's a pretty prototypical player for this era.
Yeah, I think he's the prototypical big man for this era. I think he needs to put on some more weight.
Yeah.
But in the future, if he could play the center position and bulk up a little bit to guard bigger players, a front court of him and Brandon Clark is ideal in today's NBA. I'm looking at their roster, their salary cap and their roster right now, their team payroll, and just looking at the amount of young players they have, they look like one of the candidates to make a big move if they wanted to, because of all the talent they could trade in a deal.
Yeah. Yeah, they also have like solid size salaries that they could trade away too.
Yeah.
So maybe
they're definitely the favorite. I wouldn't say favorite. They're definitely a dark horse to make a big move.
Yeah.
But in today's NBA, a lot of the players have all the power, and I don't think really anybody wants to go to Memphis. I think one positive in that situation is that John Morant could change that because of how lethal he is. And he's an absolute stud. He's an absolute superstar. He got them into the playoffs this last year with this roster of young players. And they're adding some veteran leadership, so hopefully that helps them. But all in all, this offseason, they're the only team to make a move so far, along with the Pelicans. And the move they made was a very positive one, I feel like.
Yeah, they were able to move up in the draft.
They were able to move up in the draft, and they took on some salaries in Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe. In Eric Bledsoe's case, he's kind of garbage. Hopefully they can get off of him. But Steven Adams does give them what they need at the center position to aid in Ja's success as a pick and roll big man, as a defender, as a rebounder. So again, they have so many positives going for them in this situation right now.
Yeah.
Some things I think the Grizzlies could use, like the Grizzlies get Kyle Lowry, man.
Another Kyle Lowry trade. team.
Yeah, but hey, those are the Kyle Lowry, Bradley Beal. Those are big names.
This is the team that drafted him. People forget he was drafted
Yeah.
by the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, big names to move around, and
Yeah.
even DeMar, man. If DeMar goes to the Grizzlies, I feel it's a great fit. What do you guys think?
I don't know if they would make that trade just because of the age difference there. I think
I
it
think the
was
way they're looking right now, they have the two veterans they want. I don't think they want Eric Bledsoe because I don't think anyone wants Eric Bledsoe, but they have a veteran in Steven Adams to be the locker room leader, and he's a great teammate. I think he'll give that team great spirits.
yeah.
I think Jonas is definitely the better basketball player as well in that situation, but it is what it is. That was the cost of them moving up to the 10th pick. And I don't think they're done making moves yet. I think they're going to try to move either up in the draft or get another player.
Yeah.
Let's see what they do. I think this whole and this since we're done recapping all the teams after this now, the offseason's about to start after you guys hear this. So it's just gonna be interesting. This offseason is gonna be hopefully absolutely crazy. It gives us more content to cover. It gives you guys more content to hear, to listen to.
Yeah.
But it also just gives us general craziness, which is always good for the league. It gives the league another form of interest in the offseason. And this is one of the teams that is going to be very central to that point.
I feel like this team's gonna be more interesting to see what they do at the very, very end. Like once they're done developing.
Yeah. I don't think we really have much else to talk about in this podcast, right?
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
All right. That does it for the trade speculations. We've covered all 30 teams, but at this point now. So it's been real. You guys have a good night and stay on the lookout for future free agency discussions because we're definitely going to talk about whatever happens in the coming days. And let the craziness begin.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into today's pod. Shout out to Kaiser Draws for the logo and YouTube banner, and huge shout out to Vic.Ash for the music. Links to the pages will be in the description below. Once again, thanks for listening. Like, comment, and subscribe for more YouTube content.